Well, we welcome you into CommonWell TV, where we're talking to some of the top health IT experts and finding out how their organizations are assisting with interoperability. Time now to hear from the CEO of Collective Medical, and that is Chris Klomp. And Chris, CommonWell and a lot of other interoperability groups were created to fulfill a need inside that health IT industry. How do you see that evolving as data exchange emerges here?
Yeah, look, it's an incredibly exciting time with the finalized rules from CMS and ONC yesterday. I think we're shifting to, insert, buzz phrase here, interoperability 2.0, interoperability 3.0. But CommonWell and Care Quality in particular, I think, have unique opportunities given their backers, the way that they've drawn in such a broad variety of health IT developers and health systems to accomplish some pretty extraordinary things over the next chapter, which I think the rules are really just paving the way for this to happen. At least a handful come to mind. I think the opportunity to focus on unified patient lookup in a standardized way across electronic medical records, rather than leaving it up to each individual contributing facility to focus on determining patient matches and lookup, is a huge opportunity, and that's something that CommonWell and frankly Care Quality are uniquely positioned to do. Everybody keeps talking about provider directory, and that's obviously a critical focus as well in the finalized rules for health plans in particular. And yet, CommonWell is so uniquely situated to understand that patient-provider relationship, where those records lie, who should have access to which, and whom should have access to which data, and to be able to streamline and unify that and publish that directory for appropriate, secure, compliant purposes that preserve patient privacy and yet enable a huge amount of opportunity around guiding the relationship between various health stakeholders, so the developers are free to focus on creating value for providers and patients alike. I think there's another opportunity now. Again, CommonWell is uniquely positioned to do more than probably any other interoperability player in the market, which is to help standardize data elements. We talk about US CDI, that's an important part of what ONC is trying to accomplish. But who better positioned to go back to individual stakeholders and align the data elements that are being contributed by each individual participant, and then more so help with mapping and streamlining normalization so that this data can be clinically useful at the point of care. So to me, incredibly exciting opportunity. And CommonWell in particular is very uniquely positioned to address some pressing needs that enable the rest of the industry to continue moving forward as quickly as possible.
Chris, what would you say over your course of time, some of your dealings, what would you say some of those biggest misconceptions are when it comes to either CommonWell or healthcare data sharing in general?
Yeah, I think a couple. Obviously, that's an existential identity question that CommonWell has to answer, and I think is a question that appropriately has continued to be asked over time. What is the role of the EMR vendor? What is the role of the health IT developer? What is the role of CommonWell vis-a-vis health information exchange? I'm not sure that's even the right phrasing. It's almost like people are trying to draw lines in the sand and distribute the Tonka trucks, when in fact I think there's a very complex ecosystem of many different stakeholders with very idiosyncratic and unique needs, some of which can be generalized, and instead truly there's a need for massive, and I'm going to kind of self-indulgently draw on collective effort across the industry. And so I think the first misconception is that there's an either or, there's a trade-off that needs to be made by different stakeholders. The second that I would identify is data sharing right now is still extremely focused on technical interoperability. That is to say, how do I extract data and move it from point A to point B? And then do all the things that we talk about with traditional ETL, normalization and harmonization and aligning, mapping, so on and so forth. The world isn't yet quite focused on what I think is actually the much more germane and challenging problem, which is clinical interoperability. And I've talked about this before. I think folks are increasingly thinking about it, which is to say, okay, I've figured out how to move data from point A to point B, which, hello, it's 2020. We should be able to do that. How do I actually make it clinically relevant at the point of care so that we can deliver more, better, faster care now, which patients deserve, which this massive investment in health IT should enable. And And that to me is the far greater challenge. And yet that's what's becoming now in scope. And that's just incredibly excited. But I think that's a misunderstood point. It's something that we're not spending a lot of time talking about, and is going to merit a lot of discussion in the near future.
Chris, what would you say some of the benefits are that are going to come forward here from some of those government regulations that have recently been put forward when it comes to data sharing?
Yeah, look, as I mentioned before, I'm phenomenally excited about the finalized rules that dropped this week from CMS and ONC. Truly, I mean, this is years in the making. It's multiple administrations that have been working on this effort. I applaud them. I know it's been controversial. Lots of different opinions, and there will be folks who are probably harmed in some way as a result of this. And yet, as an individual, as a patient, and for my own family, I'm so excited that the recent rules finally enable a level of streamlining of data sharing to let companies focus on what they should be focused on, which is creating clinical, economic, and administrative value uh, 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 for both providers and payers so that they can deliver better care to the patient. So, rattling off all the implications. Let's end data blocking. Got it. Check. The rules are very focused on that. How do we reduce legal and compliance burden so developers can focus on innovation? Check. Got it. That's what TEFCA is trying to do, among other things. How do we standardize data access rights so that we ensure that it's not just a question of security or compliance, but it's access. It's access controls in an appropriate way that safeguards the patient's interests and their privacy and puts them in control, while at the same time enabling providers to have a much more comprehensive purview of that patient's history. Really, to me, what's so exciting is heretofore with interoperability, we've almost forced providers to put on the hat of like a detective. They've got to go sleuthing through the patient's history and unravel the mysteries of their medical history across multiple distinct points of care, trying to pull out manually these little nuggets of information that allow them to crack the code and most appropriately take care of the patient. And now the idea that we could streamline that data systematically across all providers who have an appropriate TPO relationship, really treatment relationship with them, let them remove that hat and focus on delivering actual patient care, and shift the onus on IT providers to surface up the right insights at the right time. I mean, it's so cliche, right? Right insights, right time, right place. But actually turns out that whoever came up with that was right. That to me is what's happening with the recent government regulations. And we'll see what happens, but it's incredibly exciting to me.
And finally, Chris, what time is the gallery open at the house?
No kidding. My kids' art is on display at any time in a rotating gallery. You feel free to stop by at any point. I will say, by the way, I should have mentioned on that last point. Slowly but surely, it feels like we're finally getting to the good stuff, and so I'm cautiously optimistic. I think with the recent rules and with what's happening with TEFCA, with all the efforts of health information exchange and developers, we go one of two ways. People kind of persist the status quo, and we do the bare minimum to meet regulatory compliance. And I hope that's not the case. I hope that as an industry, we join together and we lean forward and we embrace the spirit of what everybody's trying to accomplish, what certainly what the government's trying to accomplish, because I think we will all be better off, not just as individual patients, but certainly as an economy as well as a country.
Well, Collective Medical is excited. CommonWell is excited for the future of interoperability. And for more information on Collective Medical, as well as our entire family of CommonWell members, we invite you to log on to commonwellalliance.org. Thanks so much, Chris.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.